But today we're going to be looking at is willing vessels and a willing God in Judges chapter 4. So as you're turning there, I want to share a story with us. A couple weeks ago, I started my 5th season as the varsity soccer coach for a girls' soccer team here at Suffolk Christian Academy. Now, before anyone is impressed here, and before anybody says, well, our pastor is a varsity soccer coach, let me give you the qualification. I was a willing dad who played soccer when he was younger. And that made me qualified. And so I'm qualified to coach soccer is because at one point I played, and I played competitively, and I was willing. And what happened also with that true story was they heard me a little bit on the sideline. I'm not one of those that's screaming, but they heard me a little bit saying, hey, move over here. Hey, go over there. They heard all of that, so like, oh, he's probably a coach. And so here I am in my 5th season. And so being a smaller Christian school, our pool of eligible players has always been an issue for us. And for the last 5 seasons, we have always been the younger team. Every single year, what I do is I like to average out our age and our grades and all those things just to see where we are. And so in our conference, we're allowed to play a varsity level. We're allowed to play 5th to 12th grade in the conference we're in. So many of you guys that have coached before or have children, you know that spread is like so large, right? So you have a 10-year-old all the way up to an 18-year-old playing on the same team. And so it's really fun. But with us, when we have that pool of this team, for the last 4 or 5 seasons, our average has been 8th grade. And we've done really well, though, these last 5 seasons. And so as we look to this year, we are even a younger team than we were last year. And yet last year in our conference, we were able to win the championship. But we played a number of non-conference teams. And so this year coming up, we do. I told our AD, I said, hey, I would love for us to just play a lot of non-conference teams. I said, I would love for our girls to play up. I want them to play some hard competition. And even it is, if they lose a game or two, hey, what will happen is then when they settle in on conference time and they play some older girls, they're going to do a lot better. And so sure enough, he delivered for us. We have 7 games ahead of us, and 5 of them are non-conference. We just had 2 more added here recently. And one of them, we're playing against a school that just ballpark, it costs about $25,000 to go there a year. And so just to show you kind of where they're paying and not so much on our end what we're paying for that. And so we're going to be playing them in a couple weeks, and I was getting our girls ready. And so in the span of all of that, talking to them the other day, what we see is in my prep this year, I was planning for us to have competitive teams because, again, in our conference, we do so well against those who are a lot like us. And I wanted to see one thing this year, and even in our practice time this past week, I wanted to see one thing. I wanted to see their willingness to play harder teams. That's all I was looking for as a coach, to see their willingness as a team to play some harder teams. And so one thing I would say is be praying for us and our girls as we look ahead, these next 7 games, then going into a tournament. Because I gave them that speech this past practice, and they were kind of like, wow, Coach Ricky, he's a little more serious today than he normally is. And part of that is just wanting to prepare them for the realities of the test ahead. But again, I was trying to determine what their willingness would be to face this. Now, why would I begin my sermon with giving you the situation of a Christian school, their girls' varsity situation? Again, it's not to say that I'm a varsity coach, because like I told you, I'm only qualified because I used to play, and I was a willing dad. All right, so why would I start that? Well, I would say, is it any different for us when God gives us a challenge or a charge to take action for his kingdom, and all along, God is determining our willingness? See, it's no different. I mean, it's the same things in our own life. It doesn't matter who we are, doesn't matter what age we are, doesn't matter background or experience. We have all been put in those situations where at times that God has been pressing upon us for us to do something. He's given us a charge. Or maybe you heard a sermon and you were like, wow, that one really hit me, and I'm going to go do this. And then Monday came along and it was just out of your mind, right? And you're like, okay, didn't put that one in. It didn't do what I wanted to do. There is so much of life that it happens like that. God gives us something and says, go do this. And he's determining our willingness. Are you willing to do this? Are you willing to step out? Are you willing for the charge for this to be a tough season? Are you willing to be in opposition? Are you willing to be hard-pressed? Are you willing to do things maybe that normally you wouldn't do? Are you willing to follow and know that I'm going with you? See, it's no different than charging a young varsity team to say, hey, we're about to play some hard opponents. But if you listen to me, and if you put some of these things into practice, all along the way, I will be with you. It's no different than what God does for us each and every day. This word willingness could be defined this way. The state of being willing. We're like, well, that's obvious. It's in the word. But it says this, having a ready, cooperative, or eager attitude to do something without reluctance or being forced. I mean, that's something, when we get to the aisle, a lot of times, or even beforehand, you have somebody jokingly tell you, like, hey, man, like, are you up here willingly, or are you being forced to be married right now? I know a few people joke about me. If you remember a few weeks ago, I showed that picture of me not doing my hair, and it just so happened that was a Sunday. My wife wasn't teaching children's church, so she was out there and heard that sermon again. But I remember that day, a few people like, hey, Ricky, are you up here? Or is someone pressuring you to be up there? And I mean, we've all had those conversations, people joking with us. But again, here, it's having a ready, cooperative, eager attitude to do something without reluctance or being forced. See, willingness is not just a matter for a young soccer team. It's for every disciple in God's kingdom. Are you willing to rise to the occasion that God is calling you to? And if we are a disciple of Jesus, if we are in Christ, He is calling out to all of us to participate in His kingdom work. The difference between somebody who does something significant for the kingdom and those who don't is simply willingness. They were willing to step out. They were willing to be challenged. They were willing to say, yes, this is going to be hard, but I know this is going to be something that changes my life, but I know that God will be with me, and He's going to stretch me. And all along, God is going to take me somewhere that I've not been before. That is the difference between somebody, again, who does something significantly for the Lord and those who don't. It's just a matter of willingness. Now, last week, we looked at how God used imperfect vessels to accomplish His plans. Today, we will see another type of vessel that God uses as we look to the life of 4 characters and each of their responses to God calling them to do something in the kingdom. So let's begin to read Judges chapter 4, and we're going to read 24 verses here. We get this larger context. Yet again, this is going to be another narrative, kind of like last week, though a little bit less gruesome and kind of vivid than last week. But there's another passage here, as we're going to see, that there's some element of what we looked at last week. And so let's begin to get in it here. It says, and the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord after Ehud died. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Hashereth Hagoyim. Then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help, for he had 900 chariots of iron, and he oppressed the people of Israel cruelly for 20 years. Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at the time. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the people of Israel came up to her for judgment. She sent and summoned Barak, the son of Abnon, from Kadesh Naphtali, and said to him, has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you? Go gather your men at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 from the people of Naphtali and the people of Zebulun. And I will draw out Sisera and the general of Jabin's army to meet you by the river Kishon with his chariots and his troops, and I will give him into your hand. Barak said to her, if you will go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. And she said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Then Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. And Barak called out Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh. And 10,000 men went up at his heels, and Deborah went up with him. Now Heber the Kenite had separated from the Kenites and descendants of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent far away as the oak in Zanim, which is near Kadesh. When Sisera was told that Barak, the son of Abnon, had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera called out his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the men who were with him, from Harosheth Hagoyim to the river Kishon. And Deborah said to Barak, up, for this is the day in which the Lord has given Sisera into your hand. Does not the Lord go out before you? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. And the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army before Barak by the edge of his sword. And Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot. And Barak pursued the chariots, and the army of Harosheth Hagoyim and all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not a man was left. But Sisera fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between Jabin and the king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael came out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me, do not be afraid." So he turned aside to her into the tent, and she covered him with a rug. And he said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." So she opened a skin of milk and gave him a drink and covered him. And he said to her, "Stand at the opening of the tent, and if any man comes and asks you, 'Is anyone here?' say no." But Jael, the wife of Heber, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand. Then she went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple until it went down into the ground while he was lying fast asleep from weariness. So he died. And behold, as Barak was pursuing Sisera, Jael went out to meet him and said to him, "Come and I will show you the man whom you are seeking." So he went into her tent, and there lay Sisera dead, with a tent peg in his temple. So on that day God subdued Jabin, the king of Canaan, before the people of Israel. And the hand of the people of Israel pressed harder and harder against Jabin, the king of Canaan, until they destroyed Jabin, the king of Canaan. With that, let us pray. Father, we thank you again for this morning. We thank you for your word. Lord, we thank you even for this text that we have in front of us now. And God, I pray that we would see truly, Lord, what it is that you're trying to draw out for your people to understand, that we might also walk in. So, Lord, help us to see these four, and may we see their responses. And, Lord, how they directly impact and also portray in our lives today. So, Lord, help us to have eyes that see and ears that hear. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So what we see here this morning would be this first on the inside of your bulletin there would be God works through willing vessels to accomplish his plans. God works through willing vessels to accomplish his plans. Now, similar to last week, the applications of these verses can go in a number of ways. And so if you remember last week as we were going through Ehud and what he did, one of those things was not for us to just wish and pray that our kids would grow up to be like him, to use deception to assassinate somebody. Instead, we looked at God used imperfect vessels to accomplish his plans. And as we are in this text today, at times you might read something and in preparation, in sermon prep, you're thinking, how does this apply? What is the application? And try not to draw in your own experiences, opinions, thoughts, or how you might feel about a text. And so there's no different in this text. Judges chapter 4, actually, many have attempted it to use this text in many different ways. A few of them would be this. One would be for women's rights. And so obviously we see here that the narratives, the characters, the heroes of the story are two women, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. But some have used that for this foundation. Others have used it in another way for the abdication of rights by men and the unintended consequences. So oftentimes some might take this passage and say, see, well, this is what happens when men don't step up, is then the women have to step in. And so some have used that to preach that, and I've heard that a number of times. And then there's another one as well where people will use this as a foundation that Deborah herself was a judge at that time, that they would equate and use that to say, well, to establish women being pastors, and that goes different ways as well. And so there's lots of ways that people use these verses right here to go in different streams in different ways. And I would say the temptation always in reading the Bible is reading culturally into it, reading our experience into it, reading possibly our opinion or feeling into it. And we really need to come down at the end of the day is when this was being written and when this was being given to the people then, what was it that God was trying to reveal to them? What was he trying to give to them in order for them to find application in the very setting they were in? And so rather than reading our perspective, feeling, or cultural tensions, we need to read it from the standpoint of the writer. And I believe that we're looking at different degrees of willingness within this narrative and how God is always willing to use those who are willing to be used for the kingdom. God is a willing God, and he is always willing to use those who are willing to be used by him. Now, Judges 4 focuses its attention on two women, Deborah and Jael, and two men, Barak and Sisera. And due to the willingness of the women to be used by God, the results for them far outweigh their male counterparts. So if we kind of line them up together in the parallels, this is why at times in the Bible there are parallels. You see this even in the New Testament. There's something here, light, and over here there's darkness. There might be love and there's hatred. We see these parallels and these balances. Whenever we see those are there purposefully. And so here we have that same thing. There's a balance. There is a parallel. So we have Deborah, who is a judge, and then we have Sisera, who is a commander. And we see that what happens is Deborah, she gives life, and then Sisera, he loses his life. And so we see this balance playing out with them. Then we also see in Barak, he was a military leader. And then we see Yael, she was a homemaker. And we see that Barak misses his blessing, and then we see that Yael, she ends up receiving his blessing. And so we see this duality here. We see this dichotomy, this parallel of these two sets of people, these women here and these men here. What ends up happening, we see the deep willingness of these two women, and God uses them in an incredible way. And one gives life, and one receives the blessing that was meant to go to someone else. Why do the women receive God's favor? Well, it's simple. Here we see it's due to their willingness. This is why they received God's favor. This is why we're reading about them here today. This is why this narrative is here in Judges chapter 4. As we look at all of the judges, we see their willingness and unwillingness. We see the people of God, that they do evil in the sight of the Lord, and then they kind of recapture themselves and do good for a little while, and then they get back in that cycle again. We see it's this willingness to cooperate with God. But we realize that there will be either positive things that happen afterwards, or there could be negative consequences. And so here we focus in on the willingness of these two women and to see the outcomes because of it. So what I want us to do here for the few minutes that we have would be this. What postures of willingness exist in us when God asks us to do something for his kingdom? So we're going to look at 4 of them here this morning, and we're going to draw them out from each character. So each character shows us something of a posture we might have when God calls us to do something for his kingdom. The first one is this. Number 1 would be resolved, to be resolved. So this is the first posture of willingness that exists when God asks us to do something for his kingdom, as we can be resolved. The definition here would be firmly determined about something, having a clear, fixed decision or purpose that you intend to carry out. Firmly determined about something, clear, fixed decision or purpose that you intend to carry out. So this is one of the first response we can give to God when he's asking of us to do something. Are you willing? As we can be resolved. When we look at Deborah, Deborah was resolved in her convictions to be used by God. Not because of what she knew about herself, but here's what we have to learn about Deborah, but because of what she knew about God. See, we're not given a whole lot of history, backdrop about Deborah. We don't go into this long list of anything, what tribe she might be from. We're not given a lot of the narrative that we are at times, the backstory of the other judges. And so what we see, though, is for her, she had this resolve that God was going to use her. Here she was working as a prophetess in the time. People would come to her, and she would weigh out certain decisions. They might come to her and say, hey, I have this in front of me. What should I do? Or there might have been a dispute, and they would come to her and say, we need you to judge what is going on right now. And she would use this spiritual perception that God would give her to have wisdom and knowledge to give to others. And what proved to her time and again in her work of being a prophetess was this. Not that she was receiving any of that from herself, but it began to cultivate what she knew about God. And this is what gave her the resolve. In verse 6, she implores Barak. She tells him, has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you? And so she already knew something that she knew Barak knew as well. God gave her that knowledge to know that he had already commanded Barak to go. And she calls him out and says, has God not commanded you to go? And then in verse 14, she said to him, does not the Lord go out before you? And so here she is again, giving him something that he might find a resolve that she herself has. These verses establish her response to Barak when she then says, I will surely go with you. What would give Deborah the perspective, what What would give her the resolve that she would tell Barak, yes, I will go with you and I will march against these people with you? What was giving her that resolve? Well, it was simple, because she knew the Lord would go with them. She had already had this past experience as a prophetess, as one who was judging what was going on in the lives of the people of Israel. She had already seen time and again God's hand in her life and in the lives of others. And so for her, there was this deep resolve. And so when God comes knocking at her door and says, Deborah, will you do this? Her immediate response is, yes, Lord, here I am, send me. What is the cause for us to be resolved? It's to focus on the abilities of God and not forgetting He is able to do far more abundantly than all we could ask or think. See, that's what we have here with Deborah. Deborah's resolve was that she was not looking to her own abilities, but she was looking to the abilities of God. What He can do is what gave her the response to say, yes, I am willing, Lord, use me. Even potentially at that time frame, even more so than today, to have it where she was a prophetess or a judge, very much so would have been looked down, especially with Sisera here, how we have him being killed yet again by a woman. Well, in that culture, in that day, that would be of extreme embarrassment to them. And yet Deborah still had this willingness to say, Lord, use me. And it's because she focused on the abilities of God and not forgetting that He is able to do far more than she could ever do on her own. I reflect on this for myself, a willingness. Moving here 10 years ago, one of the first questions always that first year, and honestly, sometimes I still get it, because somebody will start talking to me and ask me certain things, and then it comes out oftentimes because I have a funny accent. So when I'm here, my accent's a little more funny, and so they're like, where are you from? That last name Garza, I've never heard that last name in Suffolk. I think you're the first Garza I've ever heard in the city of Suffolk. Where'd you come from? And I'm like, from San Diego. And the very next thing that comes out of everybody's mouth is, why would you leave San Diego and come to Suffolk? Well, one thing that they don't realize and understand from me is because there was a resolve. It was a calling. I felt God calling me this direction. Even when we were in our church plants and things were going well, all our family was established there, everything that we knew was there. But over the course of 18 months from that first question of, hey, Ricky, our minister just moved on and we're looking for another pastor, and, would you be willing? And so my wife's granddaddy was the one who called us and gave us that information, and immediately my mind was, no way, no, we're here. And then 18 months later, as God would have it, here we are. And 10 years later, here we are. But part of it was there was a deep resolve and a willingness just to say, you know what, Lord, just use me. You've used me here in California. You've used me here in the churches we've been in and been a part of and helped to establish. And why not call me somewhere else where we could be used in a different state and on the other side, on a different coast? Let's go for it. Let's see what you have in store, because your faithfulness is giving me the resolve that if you've been with me, then you're going to be with me now. And so I'm just going to go ahead and let you lead the charge, and I'm going to have a resolve. And if you're going to ask me to do something, my immediate response is going to be, yes, Lord. And so here we are. And part of that, again, is having this resolve that Deborah had herself. Is the line of work and ministry was in, time and again, proved to herself the abilities of God and what God could do. And instead of looking at her own inability, and rather than saying something or having an excuse, or rather than saying, God, are you really sure about this? Well, I don't know about that. Instead, she looked to the Lord and she had a resolve. The second one would be reluctant. This is the next posture that we can have in our willingness that exists when God asks us to do something, is to be reluctant. The definition here would be unwilling or hesitant to do something, often because you're not eager or you feel some inner resistance. I mean, we have all been reluctant to do something. Every single one of us, maybe even this morning already, we've had some reluctance to do something. Maybe it was even to come to church this morning. It could have been any series of things, but we all know the feeling of reluctance, and also we can all see the face of reluctance. A lot of times we hold it on our face when we are reluctant to do something. We can see it. It's visible. And so here, which character showed reluctance? Well, Barak. Barak modeled reluctance in verse 8. And what did he say to Deborah when she said, "Did not the Lord command you to go? Well, then go." And then what did he say to her? He said, "If you will go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go." And so here he is being completely honest with her. And he's just saying, I'm not going to go unless you go. And so if you don't go, I'm staying right here. And yet here he was directly challenging the very word of God. God had already commanded him to go. And he's saying, I'm only going to listen to you, Lord, if she goes with me. And if she doesn't, I'm going to abandon what you have called me to do. He was deeply reluctant. Some would try to say, historically, and other commentators would say, well, maybe he wasn't being reluctant. Maybe instead, he was just identifying her as a prophetess, and he just wanted the presence of God to go with him. Well, the way that the whole narrative goes, we can't deny there was cowardice there. There really was. There was cowardice there. Because God told him to go, and yet he was imploring for someone else to come with him, as if God's presence wasn't enough. As if God would not sustain him if he told him that very thing. As if God wasn't going to accomplish the very thing he told him to do. And so we see Barak here being reluctant. What is it in our lives that causes us to be reluctant? Well, it's focusing on our own abilities and circumstances and forgetting we have a God who goes before us. So we see the difference, if you caught that in the resolve that Deborah had, it's because she was focusing on God's abilities. And in the reluctance in Barak, it's because he was focusing on his own abilities. And that's what separates also those who are willing and those who are not. It's because oftentimes we go down and we chase all these extra things, all the what ifs and all the excuses and all the fears and all the doubts and all the shortcomings and all the things we can't do. And God simply is waiting there and just saying, I am just willing to use someone who's willing. And are you willing? Because if you step out, I'm going to give you everything that you need in order for you to succeed. And so we see the difference between Deborah and Barak is trusting in God's abilities, and here he is trusting in his own ability. And so for us to fight having that reluctance towards God asking us to do something is to focus on his, not focus on our own ability and our circumstance, and not forgetting that we have a God who goes before us. That's something Barak forgot here. Because as Deborah said, does not the Lord go before you? And he needed that charge. He needed that command. He needed that exhortation for her to tell him, does God not go before you? Man, we've all been there before. Myself, I've been there before. Even in these last few weeks, there's been a number of times that I've kind of gone back and forth a few times and vacillated myself. And here at times we need to have that reminder that God goes before you. And so we walk in that strength. Every parent, and I would say even grandparent here, some of our favorite words that we love to hear is from a little voice. And when they say, can you hold my hand? Isn't that such a blessing when you have that young child or a grandchild like, will you just hold my hand? And then as they get older, we're just hoping and praying just one more time. Let them say, can you hold my hand? And instead they say, can you fill up my gas tank and give me the keys to the car? Which doesn't happen in my household. It happens in yours when I counsel you guys. And you just long for those days to go back. And when they just say, can you hold my hand? And why is it, though, that there is them imploring us, can I hold your hand? Because there's a deal of some reluctance there. Whether it's crossing the road, whether it's doing something scary, whether it's for the first time about to go on a roller coaster, whatever it is, they need that assurance that you will be there because they don't have it yet. They don't have the faith. They don't have the strength. They don't have what it is, the fortitude to go forward because what they see in front of them is bigger than them. It's going to overtake them. And they just need a gentle reminder that you're going to be right there and your presence will help carry them through. Well, that's what we have to understand and realize when it comes to God asking us to do something is sometimes we might be reluctant. And we just need to be the ones who remember that God is there always, ready, willing to hold our hand and say, I will go before you, I will be behind you, and I'm going to go with you. all angles of the whole thing, God's like, I will be there to sustain you. The third posture we see would be this, is retreating. So we see a resolved posture, a reluctant posture, and then a retreating posture. Retreating would be this, to move back or withdraw, especially from danger, difficulty, or an unpleasant situation. So some of us here, when we think about our willingness for the Lord and to be used by Him, we might be those who are characterized by being those who are retreating. Moving back, withdrawn, especially from danger, difficulty, or an unpleasant situation. There have been times where I might charge someone, or over the years, and even in recent years here, to say, hey, the Lord might call us to go here. The Lord might call you to do this. Or as we go out into the neighborhoods and we do different things and calling out of our comfort zone, we're just like, we're going to go do this. A number of us, our disposition is immediately retreating. Well, I'm not going. I'll be praying for them. Hope you guys have a great time. If you need something, hey, I'm here for you, but I don't want to be the one to go and do this. Sometimes our willingness here is one of retreat, to say, I'm not even going to get in the game. That I'm going to go ahead and quit before I even get started. I'm not even going to go ahead and put my feet out there. I'm not going to even convince myself to go there. Instead, I'm just going to go ahead and cut it off right away and say, no, I'm going to retreat. God's asking me, well, He can go ask somebody else. God's asking me, and then we kind of do the look behind us, like, is He talking to somebody else? Hopefully someone's behind me. We see this in the character of Sisera. He was propped up by the Lord and was very willing to be the commander of the Canaanite army who was oppressing the people of Israel. That was until it got overwhelmingly tough. And then what did he do? He ran for his life. See, here he was initially willing, because we see that it said God propped up the king of Canaan, and that king then gave him to be the commander. So it was God who propped them up so that there would be judgment upon the people of Israel, so they learned their lesson and that they would come back to the Lord yet again. And so here we see that he was deeply willing to be used in that way, to be an oppressor, to be one who just would ravage through the people of Israel and have as he pleases and do all these things until it wasn't easy anymore. Until all of a sudden God did something unique here. In those days we see that 900 chariots. The biggest thing here was oftentimes these weren't necessarily, people would say these are like modern day tanks and the way that they would come in and this and that. Well, reality would be because they had these wheels upon them, it was easier to chase people down. And so not necessarily were you attacking and going head on, but the people would see 900 chariots, they begin to run away from you. Well, if you had these wheels and something you could go after and chase them in retreat, here's the irony that they would chase people in retreat, and Sisera is the one who's now retreating. This is part of God's humor even in this text. The one who pursued people is now the one being pursued. And as we looked in that text here today, that what God did is He had them come down the mountainside. And when they came down, they came near the areas of the riverbank. And so what happened is that area and that dirt and that mud, all of it became so soft that those chariots were not able to go all the way through. And then we see that Barak and the armies were able to come down, and it said they killed every last one of them. So God, we see, was instrumental in all of this work. And partly was to see that Sisera would eventually be in retreat, running for his life. I think if we're honest, again, maybe for some of us, we say most of my life has been retreat. When it comes to things just in general, but especially when it comes to the things that God's calling me to do, is my whole life could be characterized by retreating. Constantly telling God, pick somebody else, choose someone else. I'm not equipped. I'm not going to step out. I'm not going to open my mouth. I'm not going to put myself in a situation. I'm surely not going to sign up for anything. God, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm good right here. What we see is, what is it that causes us to retreat? Focusing on the dangers and risks and forgetting we have a God who has already defeated our greatest enemies. That's partly what we do and what we need to also remember. is sometimes in this we focus on danger, risk, but then we forget we have a God who has already defeated our greatest enemies. This is something that we all need to continue to tell ourselves all the time, is that whatever it is in front of us, whatever it is that's terrifying us, whatever the risk might be, whatever the fear is that God's calling us out to, we need to remember that ultimately God is not going to let it destroy us. If He's the one calling us to it, if He's the one charging us, if He's the one compelling us, if He's the one that continues to have the Spirit of God do something in us, if He's the one continuing to present that ministry in front of us, or that position in front of us, or that role in front of us, or God's asking us to do something beyond our comfort level, realize and understand it is Him, and He's not going to allow for you to be devoured. Instead, we simply step up to the plate, and we have a willingness. The last posture here is ready. We can have one of being resolved, reluctant, retreating, and one of being ready. Ready can be defined this way: fully prepared and able to do something or be used right away. Fully prepared, able to do something or be used right away. So this is at all times saying, Lord, I am ready. No matter when it comes, what it looks like, I am ready to be a vessel for you in any way you see fit to accomplish these plans. In verse 18, we see that Yael was no doubt fully prepared, and she was ready to take matters into her own hands. Verse 18, it said, and Yael came out to meet Sisera, said to him, turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me, do not be afraid. So he turned aside to her into the tent, and she covered him with a rug. And as the story went on, we realize and understand that she then took a tent peg, and when that rug was over him, she went over there and she drilled it through his temple and went all the way down into the ground. Now, for some of us here this morning, we're about like, you go, girl, right? Some of us are like, hey, I want my daughter to be like Yael. Just like last week, we're like, well, I want my son to be like Ehud here. And so I know there's some of that we might feel here in the text. Well, I would encourage us to have a lot of tent pegs and some hammers around. But when we're thinking about here with Yael, she went out to greet him, and she had devised a plan before going back into her tent. She was willing to be used, and she was ready to bring down Sisera. And also, God all along was orchestrating all of it. Because if you remember, Deborah told Barak that you won't get the glory. Instead, a woman is going to get the glory. Now, most of us, as we were reading that initially, you would have thought she was talking about herself. That we're talking about Deborah here. We didn't even know Yael was anywhere in the picture just yet. And she herself is not even an Israelite. Herself is in no way connection here. As a matter of fact, it told us that her husband was at peace with the king of Canaan. So here she is doing a lot of things wrong. And one of the things also that were customary of the day, she broke a few different rules. One of those being that she offered for this man to come into her home and said the man, her husband, was supposed to be the one to do that. Another thing was you were supposed to show hospitality to strangers. So here she is, she brought him in, and he said, don't let anybody know I'm here. So she covers him up. Can I have some water? Here's some milk. She gives him milk, and then as he's probably starting to go to sleep a little bit here, and then she goes ahead and she kills him. And then Barak comes in, and she's like, hey, I think I got the guy that you're looking for. And if you think about Barak, he's coming in ready to go. He's probably getting his sword, like, let him out here. And all of a sudden he looks down, and he sees that the man is already killed. Immediately, that prophetic word of a woman's going to get the glory, and you're not, Barak. We see that she gets the blessing that he was supposed to have. Well, why? Is because here we see with Yael, she was ready. She was ready. She went out there to meet him outside of the tent. He didn't come all the way in. It says that she went out and she was ready. She had a plan. She knew what she was going to do here. What is that causes us to be ready? Well, it's focusing on the willingness of God to use willing vessels to accomplish His plans. That's what we must understand. For us to be ready at all times is to understand and realize that God is always willing to use you. There's not a question. Some of us, it might be our age. Some of us might be our experience. It might be wisdom. It might be education, stage of life, family dynamic, whatever it is. We could put all of the excuses that we want to. And God could look past all of them and say, here is a willing vessel, and I'm a willing God, and I will use you to accomplish my plans. This past week, on Monday and Tuesday, I drove all the way to Liberty University, and we had a 2-day conference for churches that have either a residency or about to establish one. It was a SEND network as well, which is a church planting arm of the Southern Baptists, and so we were there all day Tuesday. And then Monday at first. And so if you know, Liberty is 3 hours away. And so nothing inside of me was looking forward to a long drive. I don't mind driving, but to drive for 3 hours and then especially to have no one in the car with you. Spotify can only talk to you so much. And when you start listening to podcasts after a while, you're like, okay, I'm done with this voice. Somebody else now. And that happens for so long. And so I'm driving there. I can assure you, I did not have the best attitude when I was first starting to drive out there. I was like, I gotta wake up early. I'm going out here. And the whole time I'm just thinking, okay, what is it that's gonna be here? And so I get there, and we're there. I'm there at Liberty, and they start to show us the agenda, which ahead of time, I don't know if you've been a part of things where they don't show you ahead of time what it is that you're gonna go over. And then you get there, you're like, really? Like, if I would have known it would have been this, I probably would not have come. Like, I already know this, or I don't need this information. So I get there, I see all of that, and I'm sitting there, and I get to my table, and I'm looking at everything. I'm like, man, if I would have known all this, I would not have drove all the way over here. I got too much going on. And so then as time goes on, kind of that becomes factual, where all of a sudden a lot of the things that we're going over, I'm like, I already know this. We already went over this. Last September, we had a 3-hour meeting where we did all this stuff. I had to drive 3 hours to do all this and 3 hours back. That's a 6-hour round trip. All the gas, they're not reimbursing me for this. And all those things are going to my mind, right, on Monday. And then all of a sudden, I had a gentleman who just 3 or 4 years ago moved here from India. And his given name here that he uses is Moses. And so he sat down at the table. And immediately I started talking to him. I'm like, hey, Moses. Yeah, I was like, I'm Ricky. And we start talking. And then around the table, as God would have it, is they would have someone do some talking, and then they would have us talk at our tables. And so 2 different times, Moses began to talk about what it is he's trying to do here in the United States. And so he's in Northern Virginia. 3 years ago, he is an engineer. He's a bright mind. Just talking to him, I knew he was. But 3 years ago, he quit his engineer job so that way he could plant churches here for Indian populations in Virginia. And so right now, he's up in Northern Virginia, and they have a house church that's going. And it's some like 10, 12 families. And so right now they have about 50 people or so. And he started this about 3 years ago. And right now they're looking to plant 3 new churches in Richmond. And he said there's a very high population of Indian people there. And we want to plant new churches. And not only for them, but we also want to plant for second generations. Because they don't want to worship in the Indian style that we're doing. They're in American schools. And so they want to be in a setting that's much more American. He's like, so we're trying to figure out this dilemma and what we're going to do. And he began to say so many things. And basically for him, the frustration was here in the States. He's like, here, as we're talking about all these things, he's like, I feel like we're just overcomplicating church. He's like, I feel like we're overcomplicating what it looks like for church. And we're putting too much rule and regulation for us just to share the gospel and make disciples. And he began to express his frustration. He's like, man, in India, it's so much easier. And yet we're persecuted. He's like, but again, like all of this and planning and raising this and having this document and this bylaw and this, he's like, it's just, I don't know what to do with all of this. And I remember just telling him, I said, Moses, I said, if God's calling you to do something, and he's calling you, and you know inside of your heart that this is what you're supposed to be doing, and it's already proving that it's producing fruit, then just listen to what God's telling you to do, and don't worry about what they're saying here at this meeting. And I remember I had a few other guys at the table looking at me like, who's this guy? He's over here telling them all this stuff. But then later on, he came back to me and he said, Ricky, he's like, I really feel that God brought me here specifically for you to say what you told me at the table. He's like, it was worth it. And here I am, I'm like, okay, Lord, hear you loud and clear. You know, I got to get my attitude straight. And that you brought me here for a 30-minute conversation to tell Moses that he needs to listen to you and to continue to do what you've called him to do because he's a willing vessel and God is using him. And he might be something that God might connect our churches to be doing something with him as he tries to plant 3 churches in Richmond. I would love to partner with him. I would love for our church to be in a way to partner. So then that was that. Later on, I went to dinner with my nephew and niece because they both go to school there, 2 years apart, and but they're up there, and so we went to go hang out and called it a night, and then woke up the next morning. I was like, all right, Lord, I'm just going to go ahead and leave before this next session starts because I already did what I was supposed to do yesterday, and so I'm just going to go. We have a soccer game later, and it starts at 4 o'clock, and I got to drive here. I got to leave probably 11 to get there by 2, so I make the soccer game later, and I already know everything they're talking about in this meeting, and so Lord's like, all right, Ricky, let's go and have round 2 with this. And so then round 2 comes along, and so I see Caleb Eckerd, our Virginia Beach church planter, and immediately we start talking, me and him, and they're going to have him speak up there and say a few things about what he's doing. So I was like, okay, I'll stay till then, so that way Caleb sees me and I see him. And well then, sure enough, though, he had another guy with him, and this guy came along and I said, hey man, what's your name? He's like, Caleb. I was like, oh. So all the Calebs just find themselves and just hang out. That's cool. And I haven't found a Ricky yet here. And so start talking to this Caleb. So then our Caleb goes, he walks away, gets ready for the stage, and I go over here with this Caleb. We sit down and we start talking a little bit. I'm like, hey, Caleb, tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, what's going on with you, man? He's like, well, I'm at River Oak Church out in Chesapeake. I was like, oh, man, I know that church. I said, I know some of the elders there. He's like, oh, I'm an elder there. I was like, cool. And he's like, yeah, so right now we're looking at church planting, and we're looking at a way to possibly plant a church in Moyock, if not somewhere else, North Carolina. Like, we're in this stage right now, and we've never planted a church. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty wild. I mean, being a mega church like that, you think you guys would understand and know how to plant a church? And he's like, yeah, we haven't, and we want to. And so that kind of stirred up a little bit. So then the message came in, and of course the message was like super just on point. I'm okay, Lord, I was supposed to be here for this. Okay. And so all that's going on, and they say, all right, now what we want you to do is turn to the people next to you, and I want you to go ahead and start sharing with them and spend some time praying with them. And so I'm like, all right. So we go ahead, we start talking a little bit. And then finally, Caleb, I could just see it on him. And during the worship time, worship starts going. He's just kind of going like this. And I'm like, man, what's going on? He's like, I'm just so conflicted. He's like, because our church, they want to plant. And I don't know if I'm the guy. He's like, I feel like I am the guy, but I'm not sure. And he's like, everything's so comfortable at River Oak. He's like, I do youth stuff there. I do discipleship stuff there. He's like, money and insurance, all that stuff's there. He's like, I've been there 10 years. And he's like, it's just easy. It's comfortable there. He's like, I don't know that I should leave it. I'm supposed to leave it. Maybe I'm supposed to be on the sending team. And he starts to paint all this picture. I could see it all over his face. And then right away, I just did a fun little tactic on him. I just said, Caleb, 51-49 right now. Where are you? 51% meaning you're leaning this way, 49 this way. He's like, to go plant the church. I said, man, then go do it. I said, go plant it, Caleb. If it's already 51 in there, God's already doing all of this in you. You have 10 years being there. You have River Oak there backing you, families, all this stuff. You know they're going to send you out well. You know that they're going to have their hand upon you. You know that they're going to go with you in all of this. You're not going to be someone just parachuting in and planning and starting a church and being all by yourself. You're going to have a family behind you. And if comfort is what's holding you back, man, you need to let that go. And you need to go ahead and be obedient. And you need to be willing. And you need to just go. I remember we prayed together, and afterwards he said, man, Ricky, I really needed to hear that today. And then right away I'm like, okay, Lord, I know why I came this way. Here I was in my own pride and thinking I knew everything, and I don't need this and I don't need that. And the Lord along the way is just saying, you know what, Ricky, it's not all about you. Sometimes you just got to be a willing vessel. You just got to be right there and in the moment, being ready, prepared, being on your game, because some person, someone, and maybe even has an impact to our own selves, God might do something. God might use us. But the reality is God uses willing people. He's not going to pressure along and push and kick while we're screaming all the way. God's going to say, you know what? You're going to miss out on this blessing. God uses willing people. So as we close, final thing, we must be resolved and ready to carry out the tasks God would have us carry out for His mission. We must be resolved and ready. This week I saw a message online, and it said this: John the Baptist fully obeyed God, and yet God still allowed him to be beheaded. Pleasing God must be its own reward. He owes us nothing. Man, a great bumper sticker. Make a t-shirt out of that one, right? Let's put that on our sign. John the Baptist obeyed God and still got beheaded. What is it, though, that God is asking you to do that feels beyond your ability? Is there a situation in your life where you're thinking, God, couldn't somebody else do this instead of me? Have you ever said that before? I've said that plenty of times. Remember, though, that Jesus led us by example when He prayed in the garden. My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. We're going to look at that very thing on Good Friday this week. We're going to look at that prayer of Jesus. But we see here, we have the example in Christ. He had a willingness. He said to the Father, if this cup could pass, but not my will be done, let your will be done. Jesus had a deep willingness. It was resolved and it was ready. Are you willing this morning to let God use you in a way that would even surprise you? To me, those are the best times in life, when God uses you in a way that surprises you, and maybe even surprises others. Maybe even surprises those who know you best. Surprises your spouse, your family, friends, coworkers. It surprises even them. Are you willing to let God use you in a way that would surprise you? And the charge is, be like Deborah and be like Yael, who were used in surprising ways because they were willing vessels for God to accomplish His plans. With that, let us pray this morning.